My name is Daniel Cox, and this is my lovely wife, Esther Cox. This testimony is about our journey that we went through together. For me, the journey started probably 2 years prior to my accident. One day in service, God just provided this peace over me that I'd never had before. He reminded me of all the faithfulness that He's had through my years of going through life, losing my best friend when I was little, walking away from him, but knowing that he was always there. The faithfulness that he brought my wife to me years later to bring me closer to him, to bring me her really, that I could continue life with. But the accident that happened was back in October 3rd, 2020. I was in my backyard with our 2 little kids running around.
Luke was
in
the house taking a nap, and I had gone to the grocery store.
It was a rainy Sunday or foggy Saturday. Just was out of it. Just not in a very good mood. Just was doing whatever. I decided to go and burn some twigs in the back, and I was being impatient, not thinking things through, and making dumb decisions. And decided to use gasoline to help escalate the fire that had really no fire on it. But unfortunately, I was using a 5-gallon gas tank to pour the gas on, and the flames went to the gas tank.
Caught in the nozzle.
And eventually, long story short, the gas tank blew up in my hands. I was able to extinguish myself and run and go get the water hose and try to douse out the fire that was all in our backyard.
Lana and Tori are, at that time, our oldest Lana was 5, Tori was 3, and Luke was 10 months old. 2 weeks prior to the incident, we had been cutting down some trees in the backyard, and Daniel and I had just made this decision to go ahead and talk to her about what to do in case of an emergency if, mom or dad wasn't there, or it was just up to her. So God had already prepared her.
The kids had gone through fire safety at the school they went through. We had just talked about stop, drop, and roll. And so that we were prepared in a sense as best as we could for the incident. Obviously, the kids heard me yelling for help. And Lana at the time ran to our neighbor who we told her to go to if anything were to happen.
They had just gotten back from a month-long vacation,
which
I feel like is just God that they were there.
And he was in his garage. Had 2 neighbors in their garages. Lana went to go get them. By the time my neighbor came over, I was trying to extinguish the fire that was in the trees and such. Luckily, he was able to take over from there. And I remember grabbing my phone to call Esther because she was at the store to tell her to come home because I kind of need her at that time. And luckily, all our neighbors that were home, they came out. We were blessed that God set a nurse that was two houses down, showing the house that was for sale to her nephew. And
she wasn't even supposed to be there. The realtor for her nephew is who she was showing the house for. The realtor for her nephew fell through, and she's a realtor, so she drove over, I think, 2 hours to show her nephew this house. And she used to be a nurse, and they happened to be outside, done with the showing, heard the explosion, heard the screaming, and she ran. And so within the first few minutes, Daniel had a nurse with him, asking him all the questions. Did you inhale a lot? Are you hurting anywhere? Somebody get me some scissors so I can cut off his shirt.
Just helping calm me down as well. I was fairly calm, I think. But she was just there. It was just the comfort. I mean, having a nurse there. So she was there the whole time. We had fire EMT there probably within 10 minutes of the incident. They assessed the situation, got me taken care of, got me wrapped up to be life-flighted to Grady Hospital. And I was in a helicopter within maybe 30, 40 minutes of the accident.
So when when I got a phone call. My phone never actually rang for the phone call from Daniel. And I never even saw that he had called or that there was a voicemail until later that night. My our next door neighbor's wife called me and told me I needed to come home and that there had been a bad accident and Daniel was hurt. And so I run up to the front of Kroger and say, I'm so sorry, because I have a cart full of groceries. I'm like, I gotta go. So I rushed home, and by the time that I got there, the girls, Luke's still passed out. He's asleep in the crib, and the girls are inside with a bunch of neighbors, and I ran to the back, and Daniel was already on the, what are the gurney?
Strap, yeah.
This, and he's all wrapped up, and all I can see is his face, and he was already beating himself up, saying, I'm so sorry I messed up. And I didn't care, I don't care. I'm just like, are you going to be okay? At the time, I can only see what happened to his face, but I could tell that his face was white gray from being burnt. And so I asked if I could give him a kiss, and I kissed him, and they wheeled him out to the ambulance. And at that point, I could not stand. And so I dropped to my knees, and all I knew to do was to just cry out to God for my husband. And so I stayed there on the side of our driveway, and I prayed in the Spirit, and there's so many people standing around me, and I just didn't care. I was just crying out to the Lord. And it's almost like I couldn't get up until God gave me just this peace and strength to stand. And at that point, it was like, okay, who's getting me to the hospital?
I remember getting into the helicopter, riding all the way to Grady, and then landing at Grady, and then the next thing I remember is waking up about 3 to 4 weeks later, obviously in the hospital, not knowing what had happened, never knowing during the flight that what the extent of my burns were, or what my recovery would look like, or what kind of care I would need, not knowing I was going to pretty much be out for the next 3 to 4 weeks. So waking up in the hospital, hearing all the stories that she told me, all the things that she had to go through, was very hard to take initially. I mean, what was the things that you had to do?
So when my neighbor drives me to Grady, we get there, and I'm waiting, and I finally get a phone call, and it's Daniel. And I'm just so relieved to hear his voice, that he's still alive, because at this point I don't know if he's going to live or die. I really have just no understanding of what happened and where we're at. And so I'm speaking with him, and he's not really coherent, but I'm just telling him I love him, and I'm going to be here. I'll be here when he wakes up from his surgery, because they were immediately taking him back. And I had no idea that would be the last time that I would get to talk to Daniel and hear his voice for several weeks. Finally, the lead nurse came down, and she approached me and said, Daniel's out of his surgery. And I said, great, when can I talk to him? And she said, he's on the ventilator. You won't speak with him. You won't be able to hear him speak for weeks. And I just didn't understand, because in my mind, okay, he got burned, they'll fix him up, he'll be out of here in a week or two, maybe, at the most. And so I'm just completely naive and blown away by what she's telling me, because she's telling me he's on a ventilator fighting for his life, and not to expect him home until after the new year, which would be over 3 months away, pretty much. And so at that point, I'm just completely blown away by what's happened and what it means, and just in a state of total shock.
So
Yeah.
as they told you, the extent of the burn ended up being 3rd to 4th degree burns.
On over 55% of your body.
They ended up having to do skin grafts on both of my legs from my knees down to my ankles. Grafted this arm and my hand, and those were the initial skin grafts that I had through the staying at Grady. Obviously, I experienced a lot of side effects from all the medication. What were some of those that I went through?
So the first thing that they do when you suffer that type of burn to that degree and extent is they're going to flood your body with fluids so that your kidneys that are processing the dead skin cells, your kidneys don't fail. And so he, going through that is like, okay, will his body and his kidneys recover, make it through this? Once they got through that and they started on the surgeries and stuff, his legs were in these wound vacs for weeks. So I really didn't know what his legs looked like. All I could see, were occasionally his arms when they were changing out his bandages. And
typically you don't know the full extent of the burn until days later. So
Yeah.
the doctors can't really assess.
at least 24 hours. During the first few weeks, he's really not responding much. He's very agitated. He's pretty much so sedated that he is in his own world of hallucinations. And so while I'm in the room with him, I'm spending 2 to 3 hours just talking to him, just constantly telling him about the kids and praying over him. At one point, there was one time when I was praying over Daniel, and God showed me, it's like I had my eyes closed and I was praying over him, and I could just see angels up above his bed. He was suffering from an extremely high fever, and so I was praying over that fever to leave his body. And God showed me, these angels over his bed, and they're just above him, flapping their wings to cool down his body. And there was a large angel at his feet, and he was just blowing out over him. And at one point during this vision, I feel this gust of wind on my shoulders. And so after I'm done praying, I turn and I look, is there a vent? And there was an event. And it was just, for me, it was like, God is showing me something that's actually happening. And Daniel even said, the angel. And I'm like, you saw the angels. So it was just kind of incredible the way that, God just
Showed up.
gave me that to strengthen my faith and show me that he's working, that he's even sent his angels to help Daniel. During the first week of Daniel's stay at the hospital, I was desperate for some normalcy, especially for my kids. And so I decided that I would take the kids on a walk through our neighborhood. And the girls are actually on their bikes, and I'm pushing Luke in the stroller. And all of a sudden, just the weight of everything hit me hard. I just, was praying while I'm walking and watching my kids. I'm like, Lord, how am I supposed to do this? I don't know when or if my husband will come home. I haven't worked in so many years. How am I supposed to provide for them? There was just such a heavy weight all of a sudden, and so I was like, Lord, what am I supposed to do? I can't do this on my own. And I just heard, didn't hear the audible voice of God, but I heard in my head, I heard him say, You've relied on Daniel for far too long. For so much, for so long. It's time to rely and trust in me. I'll take care of you. And it was at that moment that I just had this, I went from a feeling of just complete overwhelm, completely being overwhelmed to just total peace. And I just knew all I had to do was choose to trust God and that He would see us through all of it. He was going to provide and He was going to show up. I just needed to trust that He would. During those first few weeks, and even after for a good while, God really showed up in the way that He used people to be a blessing and to encourage us. They just showed up. Some people we don't know, we don't even know, people we would never expect to pitch in financially or send us a gas card so I could make it to Grady, as much as possible to be with Daniel. Offer to watch the kids. Daniel's parents, who were living in Oregon at that time, flew out several times, and Vicky, his mom, would stay with the kids, and just make it possible, more feasible for me to go and be with him, which is what I wanted to do. I wanted to be by Daniel's side, and I wanted to be there praying over him. And so I was also kind of torn because I wanted to spend every second I could with Daniel, but I also knew that my children needed me. And I didn't want them to feel like they lost both of us. And so I knew it was really important for me to find a balance in the time that I spent with Daniel and also being present for my kids. And just encouraging them, talking with them about all the things, where Daddy was, and just, I think all of our faith, the kids and I, especially the girls and I, just praying together over their dad. I think our faith grew a whole lot together in just choosing to trust God to do what He needed to do in Daniel.
So waking up 3 to 4 weeks later, or going in and out, I remember trying to figure out what was going on. Obviously, I knew I was in the hospital. Again, trying to figure out the full extent. And then her slowly telling me about the faithfulness of God and showing how the people showed up, how our family flew. They were in your sister was heading out there that day. My parents left that day
from
to
the
come
West Coast.
From the West Coast to come be with her, with our family. Waking up, hearing about our church, our community, our family, our friends, even some of my customers from work, just financially blessing us, making sure that we were taken care of. My employer at the time continuing to pay me while I was in the hospital, never stopping to financially bless us in that aspect. Again, just waking up, trying to comprehend the injury, the extent of my injuries, what I was facing, just overwhelmed with gratitude, obviously frustration over myself, but ultimately just knowing the faithfulness of God and what He's done for me and my family. I had that peace that I had gotten years ago to carry me through that time. Again, coming out of step down, getting out of the ICU, just knowing, again, seeing and really comprehending the faithfulness of what He'd done.
And that our family saw no lack.
No lack, none at all. I was able to, I remember praising Him in the hospital with my legs raw, not knowing what was going to happen, how I was going to recover, and knowing my road to recovery was long. But my attitude was to get home. I had our youngest was going to be 1 in a few weeks. We had Thanksgiving coming up, and I really didn't want to be in a hospital. So my focus was to get home as soon as I could. And that was my goal at the time. I was labeled to get home in 40 days after the incident, or being admitted. It was still a long road, a lot of wound care, her just never leaving my side and taking care of me, being my rock at the time, being faithful to me as well. Just getting home, being home with my family and friends. It was really hard to grasp. And again, I still look back. She still tells me things that the little things that people did at the time. I still look back at, our GoFundMe or just text messages and through Facebook, people I don't even know, people that are acquaintances of somebody I'm an acquaintance of. It could be people I've done one job for at work and they blessed us somehow. Still grasping that and it's a great reminder that, again, God is faithful through it all. You don't know who you're going to touch in your life or what kind of blessing you could be to them or what you could, open the doors, what God can open the doors to what you do to them. But it was just very hard to get a grasp of all that as I woke up. We got home, getting a lot of wound care, and I had a lot of things still happening to my body, burns that were still starting to develop. The doctor knew, coming out of the hospital, we knew we were going to have some additional surgeries post-hospital stay, which we had maybe 1-2 weeks later for my eyes. The skin started pulling on my face, which started pulling my lower eyelids down and exposing my eye socket. So I ended up having skin grafts on my eye as well as my hand. I think they did some surgery on that as well. And I ended up having 2 eye surgeries to correct it. And luckily that was all we needed. Sometimes it takes more than that.
I think one of the biggest things that just kind of blew both of us away was that there were people all over the world praying for Daniel because of the way that churches put Daniel on their prayer chain, and it just exploded. And so the fact that Daniel was told, or that I was told, that Daniel wouldn't get out of the hospital for over 3 months, to not expect him home, and he got out of there in 40 days is an absolute miracle. In fact, when I was trying to explain to Daniel that how big of a miracle that was, I asked his doctor, I was like, isn't that incredible, 40 days? And he said, it's almost unheard of for someone in their 30s, burned to his extent and degree, to get up and walk out of here in 40 days. And he told Daniel, he said, in fact, I took your case file and I sent it to the lead burn doctors throughout the nation because of how quickly you recovered.
But again, the burns continued to react to my body months later after even get out of the hospital. So yes, I got out of the hospital, I was getting better, I was walking and getting my strength back, but seeing my body continue to scar, my hand continued to have reduced mobility. My mouth, I couldn't open it up as much as I could. It continued to scar and pull, just like my face did. So even gaining strength and getting out of the hospital, but seeing my body just continue to react and not react in the way I wished it did, was very disheartening. It was a hard struggle for me, obviously, getting to reacquaint or understand what my new life would be. There's people worse off out there, but again, it was my struggle that I was having to deal with. Again, learning. Again, there was some frustration with what I did, the mistake I made. I had I was very quick to anger through the months after recovery. You could chalk it up to the medications that I was on, the pain medications. Again, frustration with myself. It's taken me months, year, to continue to get my peace back in that aspect. And a lot of that's in the flesh. Just putting my hand in my pocket hurt. So the frustration of that, a new life or a new way of living, and grasping that and being okay with it.
And what he means, like, with the new way of living, like, because of the burns, like, Daniel can't really be out in the sun. He can't do a lot of, he wasn't able to do a lot of things with his hands, like even just getting a drink at a drive-through. He'd stick his left hand out and be like, oh, I can't actually grasp the cup with that, so let me get my right. So there's been, constant
challenges. And again, I know there's people that are worse off than me, and it's just me having to get over what my situation was, or accepting my situation. And it took me months. Again, the frustration that I had, my quick to anger, was not what I ever wanted. And I knew I had it. It was something I had to work with, and I knew it was in the flesh because after the fact, I could always look up and say, you're always faithful. And I have to always remember that and look at the blessings He done and just continue on and try to look at the days ahead. We talked about what it would be like 2 years post the accident, 3 years post. And we're in those days now, and it's a great feeling.
Yeah.
But there's still obviously learning. There's more growth that we can have. But that was definitely a struggle during the recovery. I'm still going through laser surgeries, but I really shouldn't have any more major surgeries anymore going forward.
And just the difference of where you started when you got home from the hospital, and the scarring was just awful. I mean, he looked fine. Like, he looked fine when he got home from the hospital, but that first, that second month in January was a really, really rough month because he scarred so badly that everything just got worse. And
I went and saw my doctor. He said, wow, you scar horribly. And that was great to hear from my doctor. Great thing to hear.
He's miserable and really frustrated, and his doctor's telling him. But it's true. He was scarring insanely bad. And so just knowing, like, where he was at the worst point with just physical mobility and scarring and the discomfort, lack of range of motion, and seeing where he is now is, like, incredible. Yes. Of course, I knew that he would get to this point. I believe for that. I'm believing for even more healing. My
doctor's reassured me multiple times that you've come a long way and further than I thought you would with what we've done so far. And he's very impressed with how I progressed. And I think he's pretty excited. I've had one doctor pretty much the whole time from day one, and he's been a blessing. I mean, God put him there. He knows what to do. He was willing to help me, and he saw that I was willing to do what was needed to be done. And I think I was one of his favorite patients.
Probably.
But going into obviously after the accident, we started seeing bills come through. At the time, we had
lots of bills.
We had bills coming in. At the time, we had a health sharing plan that we picked up for a catastrophic event. In this case, that insurance only covered up to about $1 million. $1
million per incident.
Per incident, and me never having really big medical bills, never thought we would touch $1 million of expenses. And as things started rolling in, I ended up finding the hospital bill for my 40-day stay in ICU, and the balance or the total was for just shy of $1.8 million, and took me back. The Grady bill, which was for my 40-day stay, and I had to come home and tell her all about it.
So I actually came home to Daniel, and he was in our dining room in tears, and I was like, what is wrong? And so he said, come back in the bedroom. I got to talk to you about something. And he pulls me in there and he says, I was wrong. I accessed the bills, and I was really wrong. We far surpassed the $1 million max. So I kind of took a deep breath, and he said, there's one bill for $1.8 million. And he's in tears, and I'm looking at him, and he's like, I'm not freaking out, but we were kind of freaking out. And he was like, I know it's going to be okay. And I was like, listen, let's just pray. And so we immediately went and we prayed, and we just, as we prayed, I was like, Lord, you said that you were going to take care of this, and we are standing on that. We're going to stand on the word that you spoke to us, that you're going to carry us through this, and you're going to take care of this bill. And so that was our choice. We just decided then and there that we were going to choose to allow God, trust God to take care of that bill, and do what He said He would do.
And that bill dragged on for a little over a year, going back and forth, waiting for our insurance at the time to reprice it, not knowing what the reprice is going to be for months, just so we had an idea of what kind of maybe balance bill we might have. But months later, they finally said that they repriced it down to about $341,000, and they can do that, but then we have to see if the hospital will accept it. So not knowing if they would accept it, I did everything I could to open communication, because I don't like to sit around and wait for a big bill like that to just happen. I did my best to communicate with the hospital, with our providers at the time, just to get clarity on what our next steps might be. At the time, Grady said they would not accept the reprice of $341. So I knew that there was going to be additional steps that was going to have to take place, and I was trying to get those in motion. But the provider ended up sending the check to Grady before I could get communication going, knowing that Grady would accept the check but would leave a balance bill of $1.5 million, and how that would be processed. So it was a waiting game again, and seeing how it would react. And that Grady accepted the check, and then one day I logged into our bills and saw that the $1.8 million was paid zero. And not knowing if that was true, if there was a mistake.
Yeah, we were like, what?
I knew God was good.
I knew He was good,
but I wanted to make sure, and there was a lot of back and forth, because again, I was told Grady was not going to accept it.
Knowing that Grady wasn't going to accept the reprice of $341,000, Daniel actually went, and the next step to do when you don't want to be left with a massive balance bill is you go and you can reach out to a third party to negotiate on your behalf. So Daniel did this for how many months?
Months.
A long time. And so they were working with Daniel, they were working with the hospital, and Daniel called and the third party negotiator, and all of a sudden they say, oh, that bill, something was hung up with it, we sent it back to Liberty. And we were like, what? And next thing we know, Liberty has sent a check to, or our health sharing program has sent a check to Grady for the $341,000. And so Daniel and I are sitting there like, okay, what happens next? Does that mean we're going to end up with a $1.5 million balance bill? They've already said they won't accept this. And so we prayed again, really hard. About a week later, Daniel checked the dashboard, and the $1.8 million bill showed up in a totally different column. It showed up in the paid column with a balance of zero. So on April 26th of 2022, Daniel calls the hospital to ask about the bill, and he asks the lady, hey, it's showing up in my paid column, and she said, yes, the balance is 0. And he's like, how? And she says, well, we received the $341,000 from your health sharing program, and all I'm at liberty to say is adjustments were made. And that was that. It went from $1.8 million to 0. Like, we didn't pay a single cent on that bill.
Again, showing God's faithfulness. And that was just the biggest bill, and we had other bills of hundreds of thousands of dollars as well that he took care of as well, that we were still going to be on the hook for, but was repriced and went back down to 0.
Yeah.
Just financial blessings on financial blessings. Just always showing up. Not knowing how, but he did.
Yeah, he did. So, just through it all, every time Daniel and I get on the topic or start talking about it, it's like just this, there's no denying how faithful God is, how faithful he was through all of it, and we can just look at any aspect of it and see God's hand on it every step of the way. So it's encouraging to us whenever we're faced with days where we're just, struggling to keep our eyes on Jesus. We recall all the ways that God has been faithful to us, especially through the last couple years.
I know we'll be able to use this journey for the years ahead of us to continue to remind us of that. Whether the next valley is harder, and I know we can always look back and know that he is always there, just providing and being faithful to us.
So we hope that encourages you to choose to trust God when things are not so good, because he's faithful when things are good, and he's faithful when things are just the worst you could imagine. God's good. So when we had this awesome testimony of what God had done with this $1.8 million bill, I was really anxious to share it with everyone. But I got a little bit hesitant because, I just didn't know how it was going to be. I was worried about how it would be taken, because I was going to be sharing it through the Facebook page for Daniel. And God warned me that the enemy was going to try to discourage me. And so I think that was one of the biggest reasons why I was hesitant to share it. But I just decided, you know what? Everybody praying, everybody who's been standing by us and with us throughout this, they need to hear this because their prayers, directly affected the outcome. I know it. And so I put it on Facebook, our testimony about the $1.8 million bill becoming 0. And, while I'm still rejoicing with all these people who are, praising God over this, I decided to go check the mail. And as I'm walking out to the mailbox, I just have this feeling that there's going to be something in the mail from the hospital. And I go and I open up the mailbox, and lo and behold, there's a single letter from the hospital. And I just take a deep breath, and I open up the letter, and it is a final notice for a bill that is over $100,000. And I almost got caught in the trap that the enemy was setting for me, of discouragement, and quickly realized that I needed to stop myself from worrying about how that was going to get taken care of, and quickly say, Lord, you're going to take care of this too. You are faithful with the big stuff, you're faithful with the small stuff, you're faithful with all of it. And so I took the bill inside. I said, Daniel, we got a final notice here. for over $100,000. We need to pray. And so we prayed again, really hard. And I asked him, to go ahead and check on the bill and see if there was any activity on it, if there was anything to be done, but to just be praying. And a week later, I'm up in Blue Ridge with my family. Daniel's supposed to join us a few days later. And I get a text from Daniel. I'm down on the dock near on the lake, and I get a text from Daniel, and it's a screenshot of our billing dashboard, and it has that bill and the balance 0. And the text says, "What prayer did you pray? Because God done went and did it again." And so I just screamed for joy, and the kids and I and my mom, who were down on the dock, we just did a dance, and we jumped in the water and celebrated, and it is just, just another sweet thing, sweet gift, for God to both warn me so that I wouldn't choose to fall into discouragement, but to also show up again, and make it even sweeter, So